Hi, my name is Dylan Sun, and I will be doing ADJ problem number one. So here's some background for this problem. We are trying to determine how long of a process should a spin lock hold for. And just for some background information, a spin lock is a lock that keeps checking in a loop for when a lock becomes available. So even in high process loads, the spin lock will keep waiting and keep checking until the lock becomes available. A mutex lock, on the other hand, it puts the threads to sleep if the lock is not available. And just to mind you, utilizing a mutex lock, there is some overhead in turning off a thread and also turning it back on. And so what we need to find is we need to find time t, which is how long a spin lock will wait for until it is able to access a lock. We should also find the threshold for a process load for when switching from a spin lock to a mutex lock is most beneficial. And so here are some of the requirements. Like I said before, we need to find time t for how long the spin lock will run for. We will also need to find the threshold for the process load for when it switches from a spin lock to a mutex lock. And by finding time t, it will allow us to find how long the spin lock will wait for until it is able to access a lock. So here's the justification methodology. We need to first measure the process load of the system. So that includes CPU count, the thread count, average queues, and all of that. We will then need to find the threshold of when the process load becomes too much, and maintaining a spin lock is not efficient anymore. So when a spin lock is activated when the process load is too high, the wait times become longer and it becomes very inefficient. At that point, it's much better to move to a mutex lock. Third, we need to calculate the time that it takes for the spin lock to wait during busy times. So during a process load, we will wait for the time it takes for the spin lock to access a, a lock. And fourth, we will then compare the two. So we will compare the estimated waiting time with the actual threshold of the process load. So if the estimated waiting time is longer than the threshold, it is much more beneficial to move to a mutex lock. In all other cases, if the threshold value is less than the estimated waiting time, it's better to hold that spin lock. So here's some analysis behind it. So when the process load is below the threshold, or in other words, when the process load is low, it's more efficient to use a spin lock, because actually putting a thread to sleep and then waking it back up with the mutex is quite costly. On the other hand, when the process load is high, the system is very busy, so the wait times are longer and longer. In this case, switching to a mutex would be better, because the CPU resources would be able to be allocated towards other things. And yeah, so here's some justification around this. By implementing this logic system that chooses between a mutex lock and a spin lock, we are ensuring that CPU cycles during high load processes are not wasted. Those CPU cycles can be dedicated towards other processes and tasks. And so it's much more efficient to have the system in place that will choose between a spin lock and a mutex lock, based on when the process loads are high or when they're low. And just to keep in mind, there is a small overhead in implementing this system in the software, but it is much beneficial in the long run to have this instead of having our spin lock wait for lots of times during high process loads. So, in summary, it is better to use this adaptive approach algorithm in determining when to use a spin lock versus mutex lock. It is especially helpful during high process loads, um, and um, Yeah, just for some, just to reiterate, the system will switch to a mutex lock when the process loads are high, which leads to better efficiency, and when the process loads are low, it will stay in a spin lock because the wait times are lower. Thank you.